Episode 5. Well, this one's going to be a bit of a shorter review and discussion, as honestly, not a whole lot happened. And yes, I do apologize again for the camera. The new camera arrived on Thursday, but fun fact, the camera was broken. I set it all up, and the camera would not record or be a camera. There was some sort of weird connection issue with the cord itself. It was basically acting like an antenna, where if I moved the cord in a specific way, maybe it would flash and light up and record, and then if I let go of the cord, then the camera would shut off. So, not a great sign. So I just called and said, hey, you need to send me a replacement because this one is broken. So hopefully it should arrive soon. But yeah, so we're still with the poor quality camera, and I do apologize for that. So now let's discuss episode 5. As I said, not a whole lot happened. So there isn't going to be a whole lot to go through, but for the non-spoiler review, I guess it's the episode that I liked the most, in that it's the episode that made me the least upset and made me the least angry, if that makes sense. There was a lot of things that happened that I really liked. And I think a lot of that has to do with them slowly kind of matching more with the books and the source material, but then it's just immediately overshadowed by, well, what they did wrong or what they did different from the source material. So I didn't hate the episode, just not a whole lot happened, and it's just leading to a point of, I should mute that. There we go. It's just leading to a point of, well, how much more are we going to drag along here before we get to the action? Because we still have 3 episodes left. And supposedly, according to Amazon, 2 of them are supposed to be the final fight or the big battle or whatever. So I guess we're going to have another episode of just kind of exposition, pointless setup that doesn't really need to happen because we already know what's supposed to happen. So just let's let it happen. I don't know. But yeah, so let's start diving into what really happened. It starts with the dwarves, and they now have the rings, and they're trying to use the rings to essentially save their people and help them get light back into Moria or Khazad-dûm. Now, I like that concept, but it got me thinking, okay, wait. If they're just going to dig more holes to let in light through different areas, why don't they just dig in the holes that they previously made that were collapsed? Right? They had the holes to let in the light, and they started to collapse. So now they're going to dig new holes, and Prince Dern is concerned that these new holes being dug are going to cause a collapse, or a whole collapse, because it's in the foundations of like the mountain and their halls. So if they break this wall, the whole thing could come down, and then we're just causing in more cave-ins. So I thought, okay, well then why wouldn't they just dig where they already dug? Yes, they collapse, but just dig it out, and then it's fine. Is it not? If it's not fine to dig there, then I would have liked some explanation as to why they couldn't do that, rather than, we'll just dig in a new location that's potentially dangerous. So I don't know. I wanted some explanation there, because I just thought that was weird. And then we kind of learn that the King Durin, has been charging essentially extra money for everything, and his greed is becoming larger. So there's the ring tax, so to speak. Every time one coin is spent, one coin has to go to the king. So the price of everything has now essentially been doubled because store owners, marketplace folk, everything that they sell, they have to charge double because half of it has to go to the king for the ring tax, and he's doing the same thing with kind of the dwarf people, or like the other dwarf kingdoms, which I also thought was kind of weird. That I was expecting, or at least like in the source material, Sauron kind of goes around to all the different dwarf kingdoms and he gives each of them a ring, so to speak. But he's given all 7 of the dwarf rings in this case to Durin, and then Durin is in control of who gets the rings, if they even deserve the rings. Which I hope they don't I hope he doesn't keep them, because they should go out to the different dwarf kingdoms. That's the whole point. I mean, eventually Thrain, Thorin's father, gets one. And Thror, his grandfather, he eventually gets one of the rings. So they should be passed around Middle-earth. Durin shouldn't keep them all. So I'm curious to see what they do with that. But yeah, so Durin's going to give the rings out to the other dwarf kingdoms, but only if they give 50% of their income as a kingdom to Durin. It shows his greed, which is fine. But I don't know. That's not what I was expecting, but it's fine. I get it. So Durin's then a little bit concerned about this. Prince Durin. He's like, my father is becoming greedy, and he was never really greedy before, so this is weird. It has to do with the ring, because now he cares more about the ring than anything else. So then after that, we get probably, honestly, the most lore-accurate aspect of the show, aside from maybe, I guess, the singing that we had that Gil-galad did at the, episode 1 or 2, was probably the most Tolkienian thing that the show has done. So this scene the next scene here is probably the most lore accurate representation of what Tolkien wrote, which is we finally see the Doors of Durin. They haven't been installed yet, but Celebrimbor and Narvi, with the help of dwarf and elven smiths, they finally make the Doors of Durin to represent the bond and the friendship that has been created through these rings, which is essentially what happened in the source material. The elves gave the dwarves the rings of power. Their friendship and their bond began to grow. They traded with each other, and both elves and dwarves grew and prospered together. So a sign of this friendship and bond was the Doors of Durin. So it makes sense, and is probably the most lore accurate thing that Amazon has done. So I really like seeing that. Then we start seeing stuff that's kind of, I think it was played poorly, but the intention was there, and I'll appreciate the intention. Celebrimbor and Annatar kind of get into a disagreement and a bit of a fight, where Celebrimbor is now starting to question Annatar's motives, as Annatar keeps poking the bear of like, oh, I told you to make your speech short. We don't have the time for these silly things. We got to be focused on the big picture here. And it turns into like this weird married couple argument of just, you don't listen to me. Well, you talk too much. How am I supposed to listen to everything that you say? Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. It was just this, it came across as this married couple argument, and it was a little bit goofy and played weirdly, but the intention was there of there's now a disagreement, and Celebrimbor is sensing that something's off about Annatar, that he's not who he says he is, that now he doesn't fully trust him, and he doesn't like what's going on. Then Annatar asks to do the 9 rings of men again, and Celebrimbor's like, nope, I'm done. We're not doing these rings. I'm satisfied with what we have done. And Annatar keeps trying to convince him. Celebrimbor keeps saying, no, men are too easily corrupted. So I like the concept or the intention of Celebrimbor becoming distant and now starting to maybe slowly figure things out, which becomes enhanced when Prince Durin arrives and talks to Celebrimbor. I think this would be a really cool story or element that would be enhanced if Amazon followed the source material. This scene and scenes later in the episode would have worked out so much better if the Elven Rings were made last. Amazon could still keep the story that they've written so far, but the only change would be that the Elven Rings haven't been made yet. They make the Dwarf Rings, and then Annatar could be in the discussion with Celebrimbor of trying to get the 9 rings made for men because they're suffering in Numenor, as he does currently in the show. And then Celebrimbor kind of has this reluctance to do it, but then agrees to do it. And then it could transition into the same thing where now the dwarves are coming, or Durin's coming back, talking about how his father's more greedy and something's not wrong. Numenor could come back and saying, these rings have turned the people against each other, something's going wrong. Celebrimbor starts to get confused and questions what he's been doing. Annatar still tries to manipulate him, and eventually Celebrimbor could still come to the same conclusion of, this isn't right. I need to do something differently, and thus he makes the Elven Rings when Sauron's gone, and then he pieces it all together of, wait a minute, these Elven Rings aren't corrupting anyone because they were made without Annatar here. That must mean Annatar is the common denominator and is causing something bad with these rings that we make when he's here. And then that can lead to the whole Siege of Eregion and Sauron making the One Ring, and we get the story that we all know. So they're like so close to making it what the source material kind of talks about, but because the Elven Rings were made first, I personally believe it just weakens the story that they're trying to tell here in this episode. Not that it completely ruins it, but it definitely weakens the impact of what's happening. Because Celebrimbor doesn't want to make the 9 rings. He doesn't want to. But they have to be made because they are made in the story. So it kind of leads to this useless, pointless debate between the two of them where, well, why are we having this debate? Because we just know that Celebrimbor is going to have to make them anyways. So I don't know if we're going to lead into like Annatar reveals himself as Sauron and now forces Celebrimbor to make the rings, or Annatar mentions that he's going to do it himself. So is he just going to do it himself later? Or just take Celebrimbor to Mordor and make them? I don't know. But it just, I don't know. A lot of it kind of feels like a pointless debate because we know that the rings are going to be made. So why are we arguing about it? When the argument could be more natural and be more believable when the result of the debate would lead to the Elven Rings being made instead. As a response to Annatar being suspicious, right? Because right now there's now no real response to Annatar being suspicious. He's like, well, you're suspicious. I don't trust you, but I'm going to do what you say anyways because I have to in terms of the story, because that's what Tolkien wrote. So it just weakens it a little bit. But there's some good stuff there, and I see the intention. I think it could be better. Then we get, again, a really cool scene, and we get some more depth to characters that I wish this was expanded upon in season 1. We see Pharazôn and his son Kemen. And Pharazôn is now king, which seemed a bit rushed and confusing because the eagle showed up for Míriel, but then because Pharazôn stood by the eagle, he was given the title of king, even though the eagles could communicate and talk and be like, what's going on here? But they don't. So that was just, I don't know, a little odd. But anyways, he's now king, and he's talking with his son Kemen, and and we see how Pharazôn is also manipulating his own son. That he says, I have a task for you, and you need to perform it perfectly, or else there's going to be consequences. It's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, your mother, who died, sadly, always foresaw you being something evil or bad or like misguided or something like that. And I'm here to protect you from that result. And if you want to learn more about your mother and the truth of what she said, you have to do this for me. And it's just, it's clear manipulation and bully tactics here against his own son. And this is kind of what results his son in being so rude to the people and to Isildur and his friend. And I don't know. I think it could have been more interesting to see something like this in the first season to develop those characters more. Because Amazon talked about how the first season needs to be about establishing characters and building the world. This is a perfect example of something that could have helped do that better in the first season. And then we would care more about the story and be more interested in what these characters are doing in the second season. So I liked this scene. I just wish we got it sooner. This essentially then leads to, of course, Kemen, Pharazôn's son, dismantling the army, we'll call it, that is loyal to Míriel. So all of the sailors that work for Míriel and under Elendil are being stripped of their title. They have to hand over their armor, their gear, and all of this stuff. And Elendil shows up and is like, what's going on? Kemen kind of says, you're a traitor, so you have to hand over your stuff, and you're being stripped as your title of captain or whatever it is. It's like, okay, fine. He hands over his gear, but the sailors that have worked with Elendil for so long are of course still loyal to him. So even though he's stripped of his title, they still call him captain, and this pisses off Kemen and makes him uneasy. We then learn of a little bit of a love triangle between Valandil, which is Isildur's best friend, Isildur's sister, and then Kemen, Pharazôn's son. Kemen likes Isildur's sister and tries to do things to impress her. She just looks at him as a friend, and so like works with him, but also kind of ignores him, the classic like friend zone type thing. And then she's interested in Valandil, Isildur's best friend. But Valandil doesn't like Isildur's sister because his sister's kind of annoying and she's ruining Numenor and is working with Pharazôn and doesn't respect her father. So he doesn't like her at all and has no interest in her. So it's this weird, it's not even a full triangle. It's just like a straight line because none of them like the person that likes them. So another more interesting character relationship that's being built that would have been cool to see in the first season. And this is all kind of stuff that Amazon's created that isn't tied to the books, that is fine, that I don't have a problem with. I just wish that they did this all sooner to make us care more about these characters, so that when something happens to them, it's more impactful. Then we see Pharazôn kind of connect and attempt to use the Palantir, and basically being a hypocrite, because the Palantir is a very useful tool, and he's about to learn this, but we don't actually see the result of him touching it just yet. Elrond arrives to Lindon and basically says, Galadriel was right. The orcs are heading to Eregion. We need to send forces there now. Gil-galad says it's too late to send forces because they don't have the numbers to fight Sauron in Mordor and fight Adar in Eregion, and if they're united, we just can't fight them both. And it kind of ends there. They're trying to lead to Gil-galad doesn't want to react because he doesn't believe they have the numbers, and he's also kind of being weary because the ring keeps showing him visions of Sauron. So he's more worried about Sauron, not realizing that Sauron is actually in Eregion, because they still don't know that yet. And it's then leading to Elrond is going to have to be the one that arrives in Eregion to fight Sauron there. We're not getting to that point yet, but that's what it's leading to. Then we go back to the dwarves, and Disa now has second thoughts about this ring. She was the one that forced Prince Durin to convince his father, and now she's like, wait a minute, something's not right here either. And that's what leads to Prince Durin going to talk to Celebrimbor later. We find out about the ring tax that I previously mentioned. And Disa buys this tuning crystal, she calls it, drops it, and Scooby-Doo follows it down a path that leads deeper into the mountain and comes across pools of water. She sings to try to find the tuning crystal, and then a monstrous roar is heard or responds back to her singing. I don't know if they're trying to imply that it's the Balrog or the Watcher. The water makes me think it's the Watcher. However, technically, the Balrog was found in the foundations of stone, so to speak, within Khazad-dûm, which there was a giant lake outside of where the Balrog was found. So they could also be implying that it's the Balrog. We're all assuming it's the Balrog because we know that it's the Balrog that ultimately leads to the demise of the dwarves in Khazad-dûm, so that makes sense. And then she goes and runs and tells Durin. She's like, something's we're waking something up. So Prince Durin goes to his father, like, hey, father, we have to stop digging. We can't keep going. Something is wrong here. Disa's heard something. We have to listen to her, and King Durin's just going to ignore it and continue ordering the miners to keep digging deeper because the ring is giving him the power to see every vein within the mountain, and there is so much more that they can find that they have to dig for. If he doesn't see this monster, then to him it doesn't exist because King Durin can see everything within the mountain. So he doesn't see a monster, he only sees ore, therefore the monster doesn't exist to him, so they're just going to keep digging. Then we get this scene to me is a bit worrisome. I liked the idea, but I'm worried on what it's going to lead to. So because Celebrimbor has refused to make the Elven Ring, or the 9 Rings of Men, Annatar has taken upon himself to make it. By doing so, they create one ring. But this one ring, as a test item, we'll call it for now, causes her name's like Moran Merdinia or Mirandia or something like that. It's just a blonde elf. She's like the assistant of Celebrimbor. She's put on the ring and it's turned her invisible. And then she starts seeing essentially the Wraith world that Frodo's in when he puts on the ring, and she now starts seeing Sauron. She sees this flaming body, this shadow that's growing, and of course it's scary for obvious reasons. I don't know if they're implying that either one is this like the beta version of the One Ring, or was this truly supposed to be one of the 9 rings of men, and that Amazon has just added this twist of, oh, well, if all the rings of men turn you invisible, which is not the case. I get that the Nazgul are essentially spirits and invisible. So yes, you would think that they put on a ring and are just invisible, but that's not the case. They put on the ring and they're fine. Right? Like the kings of men that receive the rings, they put on the ring, it's just a ring, they feel more powerful, it enhances their corruption and greed and all that stuff, and it slowly kills their soul and body. It's a slow progression. It wasn't an instant thing. It's not like the Nazgul can take off the ring and then they appear as a zombie, right? They no longer have a body. Their physical representation is shown by the cloaks on them because they don't actually physically have any kind of body that you can see because they've lost it to the power of the rings. So I hope that this is just more of a beta version of the One Ring and not one of the 9 rings. And Amazon's just thinking that that's what the 9 rings do, because that's not what they do. This then leads to a really awkward scene that this will make me more mad than anything that we have seen in the series so far. Sauron is sitting with Celebrimbor's assistant Meridia or Mirandia, whatever her name is. And I like the manipulation tactics he's using here, right? I like that part. He's talking about how, who you saw is actually Celebrimbor, because by making the rings, the 3 elven rings and the 7 dwarf rings, each ring has taken a piece of his soul. And now he's getting closer and closer to shadow and darkness. So what you saw was actually Celebrimbor. But we can't tell him this yet because it'll scare him and make things worse. But we can save his soul by keeping this knowledge away from him and by making the 9 rings to bring balance back to his soul. And she's like, oh, okay. That part I all like. Love the manipulation tactics going on here. However, what I didn't like is that he stood there for a moment and looked at her and said, you know, in the right light, you remind me of someone. Oh, who do I remind you of, Anatar? You remind me of Lady Galadriel. Now, I really hope they're not implying that this is her daughter, because this shouldn't be her daughter. 1, it's not even the correct name. 2, she didn't live in Eregion. She's currently should be living in Lothlorien, which hasn't been established yet. And 3, she's never had any remote communication with Elrond, who was in Eregion last season. And if she was supposed to be Galadriel's daughter, there should have been scenes between her and Elrond in the first season to establish that they have a connection, because Galadriel's daughter, as we all know, marries Elrond. That leads to Elrohir and Elladan and Arwen. So I really hope that's not what they're implying here, because I'm going to be extremely upset if that's the case. I would much rather have this stupid forced love interest thing that they want Galadriel and Sauron to have than to this random made up character turn out to be Galadriel's daughter. We also haven't even seen Galadriel interact with this girl, even though Galadriel was also in Eregion last season. This character Mordania or whatever, she's new to this season. Yet every important character has been in Eregion in the previous season. So it's going to be really weird if she is the daughter. We then get to a scene back in Numenor where essentially they're in a shrine underneath the city, and they're just paying their respects to the dead that died in the battle in the first season, and they're lighting candles on seashells and sending them out to the ocean. Love it. Great little sequence. But it is then interrupted by Kemen, who is here to shut it down because this area apparently needs to be used for aqueducts now, as ordered by King Pharazôn. The priest dislikes this. There's a little bit of an argument. Then a person steps, like a civilian, steps forward and says, if we don't let these candles be and then light or snuff them out later, then these souls will be lost forever and they won't be able to pass on into the afterlife. And this shrine and little sculpture is super important in this process. Kemen then, of course, just takes it and smashes it. This leads to a little bit of a brawl between the civilians and the guards, and then this leads to Elendil then punching Kemen in the face. This, of course, gets Kemen upset and is about to then punch Elendil back while Elendil is being held back by guards. Valandil at this point steps in and then fights back and defends Elendil. This leads to a fight between Kemen and Elendil. And after a bit of a fight, Valandil could have the opportunity to kill Kemen. Elendil says, no, you're better than that. So Valandil lets him go. And then Kemen stabs Valandil in the back, and Valandil dies. And then Elendil gets carried off to the jail cell. And then we end the episode with we're back at Adar and the orcs and Galadriel, and essentially what they're trying to do here is that Adar is here he says he's here to fight Sauron, and that he wants to use Galadriel as an ally. And this kind of course, catches Galadriel off guard, but that's basically where the episode ends. So it's a little bit weird that that Galadriel's going to fight alongside the orcs to fight Sauron in this coming up fight. I don't know where it's exactly going to lead to, because we still don't also know how Sauron is going to convince the orcs to fight for him. It's like we're going to get the Siege of Eregion with Adar destroying the city, but Sauron isn't really going to be a part of it because he hasn't revealed himself as Sauron to the world yet. So I'm a little bit curious and worried about how that's going to go. I guess no, there's one more scene after this, and the last scene is it's Annatar has finally convinced Celebrimbor to continue making the rings, because once Celebrimbor has kind of learned what they were doing with the ring that turned Mirandia invisible, Celebrimbor's like, no, you guys are doing it all wrong. If you guys do it, it's going to make it worse. All right, fine, I'll help you out, and we'll do it right, because if I don't do it, it's not going to be done right. You guys all have to put in the same amount of effort as I do, though. Otherwise, you're not real smiths. So Annatar has convinced Celebrimbor to make the rings, as we just all knew was going to happen, because the rings have to be made regardless. And then that's where the episode ends. So we have 3 episodes left. My prediction is that next episode 6, we'll go back to the stranger in Rhûn, and we'll see his fight with the Dark Wizard. We'll probably get a little bit more information on who the Dark Wizard is. And then we'll probably get my last episode prediction of we'll get a little mini version of the Scourging of the Shire, where the people of, or the desert people of Rune will fight the Stores and their little village that is in Rune and chase them out and burn it down and then force them to migrate. We might get something else in Gondor in the south where we'll get a little bit more of a further expansion of Isildur's story and Arondir's story along with the Wildmen there. I don't know where it's going to lead to just yet, but I'm sure something else will happen there. And then they'll use that episode to lead into the fight so that episode 7 will be the start of the fight, hopefully, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, there's still no evidence of $60 million per episode. Don't know where this money is going. The CGI just looks terrible. The props are terrible. Like, even the dwarves that are mining, their pickaxes look like rubber. I don't understand where the money is going with these props. The costuming is just average. And like, so, nothing feels real. The only thing that feels real is the orcs, and I don't think they spent $60 million on the orcs. So I don't know where the money's going. Amazon has said that there's supposed to be 5 seasons of Rings of Power. I don't know how we're going to get 3 more seasons after this. I don't know. I did some digging into the history a bit, and the only major events that happen is Sauron gets all the way to Lindon, but fails in Lindon. And then this is where Imladris is established. Sauron in the books then pushes into Gondor, and that's where he takes Minas Ithil and turns it into Minas Morgul. I think there's some random fight between a group of elves and some wildmen at some point. And then I don't really know what else there is in terms of the source material, aside from, of course, the Sinking of Numenor. So the Sinking of Numenor will be a season, that's for sure, which will then lead into everyone building Gondor. So I guess that could be a second season. But I think that should all be its own season, really. Like, just spending an entire season on the men, like, of Numenor would be really good. Where they do the Sinking of Numenor. This leads to the building of Osgiliath and Minas Tirith and Minas Ithil, and then Sauron attacks it and takes Minas Ithil and turns it to Minas Morgul. That could be a season, I guess. We could then get a season on the elves, maybe, where Sauron attacks Lindon and maybe Imladris, and fails, and then gets pushed back into Mordor. So that could be next season, I guess. And then season 5 would be, or no, season 4 would be Numenor, and then season 5 would be the Battle of the Last Alliance, I guess, with some random scenes of hobbits or the Harfoots and the Stores making the Shire, and then the stranger being revealed as Gandalf and him helping out where he can, I guess. So I don't know, maybe as I talk it out loud, I could see how they could maybe be 5 seasons, but I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. And I know there's people out there that are liking the show, but there's not enough of you out there. There's not enough. I don't know how much Amazon will continue doing the show. In terms of numbers, season 1, the first 2 episodes had 2 million viewers, or well over 2 million viewers. And of course, over the course of this show, the numbers dropped drastically to the point where the first 3 episodes, because they were all released at the same time, had half as many viewers. So like 1 million, we'll say. But to the point of now where we are today in episode 5, we're at 70% less than where we were at the start of the season, at the start of season 2. So the numbers are just drastically dropping, and that doesn't bode well for the show. So we'll have to see how it goes from here. I've seen a little bit of improvements from Amazon, but at the same time, I just see constant reminders of, I really think this could have been better if they just stuck to the source material, and that has nothing to do with what they own for rights. It has everything to do with just the choices they have made with the rights that they have. They could have made the rings in the correct order. That has nothing to do with the rights that they have or don't have. They made a choice to make the rings in this order that they did. The show could have been better if the rings were made in the order that is listed in the writing. The show could have been better if they had the correct characters going on their correct stories. Such as, building Lothlorien. They have the rights to that. Or they should. We could be seeing that right now with Galadriel and seeing how she's actually becomes a leader of the people and a ruler of a kingdom. So there's just these things start to pile up, and it makes me question why they make all of these choices. And that has nothing to do with what they don't have the rights to. This has everything to do with just what they're doing with the show. So we'll have to see. But yes, thank you for watching. Thank you for joining in. Leave your thoughts, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.